Mystery and Deceit, From Earth to Mars. Book 1 of Chaos' Orbit Saga. Written by James T. Hall. Narrated by Chris Pullman. Episode 7, How We Met, Part 2. The military brought in investigation teams who later concluded that enough electricity had passed through us all to light up Chicago for a week. As it was, some of the Marines walked away with some fractured bones due to severe muscle contraction and mild burns, both of which miraculously healed within hours of their release. We were repeatedly interviewed by multiple investigators. The Marines, who were under sedation through much of the experience, remembered very little, save extreme pain. Our accounts, on the other hand, corroborated the military's pre-established opinion. Scientists of the failed Project Plymouth disobeyed orders and moral guidelines and took it upon themselves to continue unauthorized human experimentation in the misguided attempt to save the aforementioned project. Consequences of their actions were the loss of billions of dollars in government funds by way of lost data and material in project resources, as well as the immeasurable loss of one Lieutenant General Nick Lathrop. The investigators recommended strenuously that we be removed from any military affiliation, that our names be redacted from official records, a cover story put in place, and Project Plymouth being definitely shelved, mothballed, and itself redacted. The military leadership and government oversight committee agreed. Our participation in the program, as well as the program itself, was largely removed from history, and those years of our lives completely blanked out. We in the program simply ceased to exist. The lower-level scientists' names were put on top of ours where needed for official documentation of the time Project Plymouth had existed. We were able to maintain government contacts through back channels, and so learned that the Marines actually manifested the nanitic abilities we had sought to grant them, but only for a few months. Several high-level black ops at the very end of the Coalition Wars, those involving precision infantry strikes, were carried out by those Marines. The scientists yet in the government examined them, but were unable to understand what exactly granted them such abilities. We had little doubt about the possibilities of them finding anything, as those of us who knew what to look for had been blacklisted. And so ended the project that was started to save the Western world. A project that took the future of a team of 4 scientists and as many forward-thinking military minds and turned it into a pipe dream. No employer, university or otherwise, could find out why we had permanent black tabs on our files, only that we did and were considered undesirable associates and employees. In more ancient terms, we would have been called persona non grata, or even lepers. Adam, James, Melinda, and I eventually gathered what resources we still had and formed an R&D company for vehicle, computer, and biotech advancement, working with our strengths to make a living. It was hard going. Our initial years we worked more as ad hoc faculty and advisors than independent developers. But the work always proceeded quickly, much to our mutual amazement. We didn't question it at first, figuring it was karma's way of paying us back for the loss of our past. Once we were able to start directing our own research, we made one remarkable innovation after another. Adam managed to retool existing engine technology with only slight modifications to produce nearly 80% more efficiency than standard with 80% less waste. He also figured out a way to create large battery forms for electric vehicles that held triple the capacity in half the space of industry-leading vehicles. James, Melinda, and I were able to engineer the first biotech computers of any size that were stable. They ran silently, 30% cooler than any existing computer could, and on about 37% the power. It was all innovative use of existing technology, to be sure, but all were nonetheless breakthroughs. Eventually, we were even able to market some of our products to the government through third-party vendors. By this point, it had been years since our involvement with the project. We'd put it behind ourselves as a failure and black hole in our lives that we just barely managed to escape. That is, until an old friend came to visit. During Project Plymouth, the guards specifically designated for the project, an independent detachment of the base guards, were commanded by a Captain Meng Tao. He was a Marine of impeccable character, unwavering in loyalty to God, country, and friends. He certainly would have been a colonel were it not for his intense loyalties. Meng volunteered early in his military career to become a member of various special operations units. One of his early commanders, a then Lieutenant Colonel Lathrop, saw a talent in Meng that he couldn't let go to waste. He encouraged Meng to become the best he could and to use his skills in more and more covert missions. In some of those missions, Meng's loyalty to God and friends interfered with his loyalty to country. During one mission in Venezuela, Meng and his team were to destroy a factory that was suspected of secretly making weapons, specifically explosives, and then shipping them in teddy bears to various terrorist organizations. Thing is, the regime at the time had children stuffing and loading the bears. Meng simply refused to kill all those children. As it turns out, though, the plane carrying the first and only shipment from the plant exploded shortly after takeoff. Apparently, one container of the explosives was defective. Diplomatic pressures were brought to bear from the intel Meng's team gathered, and the plant was quietly shut down. Field commanders, though, didn't like it when Spec Ops units, specifically their commanding officers, disobeyed orders and enacted their own agendas, regardless of personal reasons. Another time, rather than leave a member of his team behind alone, Meng kept his team from evacuating to help their injured comrade. It took 2 months of negotiations, but he and his men, including the recovering team member, were finally released from custody. At that point, Lieutenant General Lathrop found a new job for the disgraced and out-of-favor Captain Tao, one he assured Meng would win him back some points. It didn't, of course, as he was found to be complicit in the events that led to the destruction of Project Plymouth. The military allowed him and his direct subordinates, Lieutenants Jessica Brune and Claire Jakes, to gracefully retire from active service. They too were blacklisted. Ex-Spec Ops people, though, can find ways to make a living where most cannot. They became soldiers of fortune, mostly taking on jobs as escorts for a private international shipping company whose ships often passed through pirate waters. While doing so, fate had them meet up with the only enlisted guardsman present in the lab that night, D'Andre Freeman. After the project, he had shuffled around different posts, always seeming to find trouble. In truth, he had learned his lessons from Meng too well. It was constantly a buddy of D'Andre's who started fights. D'Andre, though, following Meng's lead, always finished them. Meng's small crew worked and saved enough to start their own private protection firm. It was during this time that Meng heard of a small upstart R&D company by the name of NAR Defense. The website of the company had no pictures of its founding owners, but Meng followed his gut and talked with some contacts who introduced him to others who eventually gave him 4 names they had heard connected with the company: James, Eric, Melinda, and Adam. Verifying the names through other sources, Meng went to verify them in person. On that day, I had asked James into my lab. An experiment of mine was producing a very odd result. I'd been trying to use bacteria to enhance my existing neural hard drive. What I expected was that on first try the bacteria would physically infect the hard drive. What happened was that they and the neurons comprising the hard drive mutated into hybrid cells that instantly quadrupled the storing capacity of the drive, speeding it up by a factor of 2 in the process. The thing was, I didn't understand why. I replicated the results 3 times, but each time couldn't find the catalyst that made the mutation happen. Sitting at my lab bench facing the window, we watched the footage I had as it ran side by side with data streams, trying to see where the change first happened. Melinda was in her lab, toying with a new plastic compound. She was trying to integrate the ablative properties and sturdiness of metal, the lightness of plastic, and the transparency of glass to make substances more durable and widely useful than standard bulletproof glass. Her idea for the stuff came from an alcohol-induced vision of a transparent Abrams tank when we were out at a bar. Strange thought, to be sure, but she had a point. I mean, can you imagine that? A tank crew coming at you in a glass tank. I mean, you'd be like, what the hell are they thinking? Until your rocket just bounced right off of the perpendicular side. Then it's all, get your shit, we gotta get out of here. She had 2 assistants helping her take measurements on the early samples. Adam, meanwhile, was busy testing new variants of gunpowder. He'd found a compound that packed 3 times the energy per gram as the most efficient contemporary gunpowder. The only problem was that when put into standard rifle cartridges, it mushroomed the barrel. Too much force for the metal to withstand. He was attempting to basically cut the standard gunpowder with the new to make existing weapons more powerful while also testing his own jacket design and modified firearms. 3 times the power meant he could get the same punch from the same projectile in a smaller shell. Smaller shells meant more could be taken into battle by each soldier. More ammo per soldier meant longer sustained fighting and a better chance for victory. It also meant more efficiency when shipping a greater amount of ammunition. When we were working, we all got a call from NAR's front desk informing us that someone was there to see us. A Mr. Tao from Plymouth. Each of us knew it was Meng. To actually see him after all those years was a shock, to say the least. After exchanging pleasantries, he told us he had a proposition for us that he thought we could agree to. James suggested going to NAR's conference room where... I interrupted Eric's recounting. Wow! Hold on. I gotta catch up here, I said as I frantically tried to get my thoughts on the note tab. Luckily, it caught everything, so I could go back later and listen to it again. Some things, though, I needed to clarify at that point. Take your time. I'm not in a rush, Eric said as he sipped his water. Refill? I had been sucking down water like mad. My throat like a desert from the wealth of information pouring my way. Eric, ever the professor and used to long bouts of lecturing, hadn't killed much of his glass. He grabbed mine before I could respond and headed into his kitchen. Good, I thought. Now I can catch up. First on the list for clarification, nanites. Second, the goal of Project Plymouth. The loose connections I had been able to make between Project Plymouth and the leaders of the TDF had solidified. It had been the same group running both places. Plymouth, though, had been under the auspices of a government. The Terran Defense Force, on the other hand, had all governments on Earth under its auspices. How had a group of 8 people made such a huge jump in power? Eric returned with my glass of water. Good to go, he asked. Yeah, I replied. It was a fair blessing that he had gone on so long, as now I had questions to ask. First, nanites. Can you explain them to me a bit more? Sure, Eric said. Nanites. Nanometric-sized machines. We created our own lexicon to describe the ways we use them. Nanites were our brand of nanomachines that we used to bond to humans. Bond how? I asked. Symbiotically. We wanted to integrate them into the host as a sustainable, hived, third-party, internal system that would take from the host what it needed to function and also give back in return. Ah, I said. Okay. Second question. I assume this give back you referred to was the goal of the project from the beginning, so give back how exactly? I can go more into detail on that in a bit, Eric said. Generally, though, we sought to enhance human abilities. Basically, ours was one of many super soldier programs the U.S. tried, starting as far back as World War II. Originally, it was an idea James and I had shared, the use of nanites, so he was a natural choice to bring into the project. He had great instincts as far as logistics go, so he was also the natural choice to lead the project. You know, when I would play Risk with him, he'd end up using the damn container the pieces came in to move his army around the board. So a super soldier program, I said. Yep, Arab coalition was making huge gains in Europe and Asia prior to the loss of their leader. The United States saw a new weapon to counter their advance, something powerful enough to be carried by one soldier. So, ours was one project that took the concept an extra step and made the soldier the weapon. Would have worked out great too, Eric said, a thoughtful look on his face. Did work well, I pointed out, looking at him out the tops of my eyes. Touché, Eric said with a broad grin. Mystery and Deceit, From Earth to Mars. Book 1 of Chaos's Orbit Saga. Written by James T. Hall. Narrated by Chris Pullman. Episode 7. How We Met. Part 2. Visit us online at www.narclaninc.com to link up with us.